26 years old. I just got my real estate license. And the company that I chose to hang my license with had a mandatory training program. Good for them, by the way. Most companies don't do that. The challenge was we were gonna have to present amongst all of our peers. I'm extremely competitive. If you're on my team, sometimes you may not like it because I'm gonna push you. I hate losing more than I like winning. So I took this super seriously. Okay, I was like reading and studying and chanting. I was role playing with Carla on a regular basis. Like, hey baby, you gotta sit down, I gotta run through this presentation. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, trust me. And I even go out and I get a suit. Okay, now I had no money at the time. I was going to school at the University of Florida. So I went to an estate sale and a guy who died happened to have my measurements. So I got the suit, and forever and ever, me and Carla would joke, yo, that's from the Dead Man collection. It's like, who you wearing? The Dead Man. Okay? And I showed up dressed fresh like $1 million, ready to rock. And I was baffled by what I saw. Because everybody else was wearing flip-flops and fucking jeans and pajamas, okay? And it was very clear to me that nobody took this as seriously as I did. They didn't prepare at all. They were stumbling and fumbling. And I thought to myself, I'm onto something here. So what I did is I recognized that the money is not in the service. The money's in the selling of the service. Okay, you guys say like, what's your competitive advantage? You'd be like, I put my clients first. Just, you know, that's fucking stupid because everybody does that, team. Well, you know what, Natalie? I'm honest. Huh. And I realized, look, let me prove my point. How many of us have a license to sell real estate? Show of hands. Okay, that all allows us to perform the same service, correct? Yes. Do we all make the same amount of money? No. Why? Some people know how to sell the service better than others. So if that's true, I realized I should spend all of my time learning how to sell the service. Do you understand? Not sit in meetings and figure out the fucking paperwork. Which has nothing to do with making money, by the way. Okay? So what I did when I realized this, I was like, okay, I need to spend all my time selling the service. I role play twice a day, 6 days a week for 3 years. I would record myself giving presentations and send it to my coach to critique. I would sit down at a listing presentation and be like, hey, just so you know, I've hired a professional to help me with my presentation skills. So would you mind if I recorded this conversation? You want to have a really good, entertaining evening? Record one of your presentations, sit down with your significant other and a bottle of wine and be like, this is going to be entertaining. Because you'll find yourself like, what the hell? Like, why did I say that? I just verbally vomited. What is that? It's embarrassing. You walk in there, you're like, oh my God, you have a puppy? I have a puppy. Yay, we should be best friends. Please pick me. And now I no longer worry about what to say on presentations, including with these changes. Okay, I no longer worry for our coaching clients, one-on-ones, 12 of which make over $1 million a year. I no longer worry for the 355 agents that we've partnered with in the last 25 months. Because I know when times get tough, only the skilled get paid. Period, end of story. The cool part about skill is that you can learn it. It implies, though, practice. Show of hands, how many people practice daily what to say and how to say it? Everybody else is independently wealthy, apparently. How interesting. Let me ask myself a question. Do I have C habits and I'm praying for an A+ life? Do I have C habits, but I'm praying, please for an A+ life? That's an unrealistic expectation. And I believe that everybody in this room with the right strategy, the right approach, the right skills, the right way of thinking, you could accomplish anything that I've done in less than half the time. I've spent the last 17 years of my career. I've sold 2,000 properties. 80% of that business is listings sold. I started a coaching company with 100 coaching clients, 12 of which make over $1 million a year. I own part of a Keller Williams office. I sold it back, made a transition to EXP, and in 25 months, recruited 355 agents to the organization. So what we're going to do today is we're going to spend, I don't know, maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, and I'm going to run through with you a few things. Number one, what has changed with these rule changes? Okay. Number two, how to present them on a listing side. Because you notice that we were just having this conversation. I'm sorry, your name again? Matt. Me and Matt were just having this conversation where he's noticing that all of the focus seems to be on the buy side. Do you know why that is? The vast majority of agents are buy side heavy. 70% of their business is buy side deals. So the reason is there's lots of anxiousness and anxiety around it. Does that make sense? She's like, I'm really grateful that now we're going to be talking about, okay, how do I present this on the sell side? That when you're sitting down on a listing presentation, somebody says, hey, I heard I don't have to offer any commission. Anybody heard that? Anybody going on listing appointments has heard it? The listing presentation itself, what exactly has changed? Well, virtually nothing. 99% of it is still intact. Okay. The only thing that's really changed is a little detour in the conversation that we're going to have in terms of compensation. This I wanted to share with you so you could just get a real clear picture as to how valuable this skill is. According to the National Association of Realtors, boo, the average realtor will go on 100 listing presentations and only take 20 listings. Guys, that's pathetic. I know why. You guys just revealed it. Nobody's practicing. That's why. Let's do the math. If you only take 20 listings, 15 sell, you make 150 grand. People think this is a lot of money. I don't think it's a lot of money, but okay. Let's say you make 150 grand. I will go on 100 listing appointments and take 85. 80 listings, 70 sales, 700,000. Look at the difference in income. So if you want to get paid like a professional, you need to practice like one. If you did not raise your hand, that's letting me know you're not getting paid like a professional. I don't care how many homes sold you put with your client. It's like you're one closing. So there's 3 segments to the listing presentation. And again, guys, 99% of the conversation has not changed. The only part that's changed is we're taking a small detour. So the way I like to describe this to people, how many of you guys use like iMaps or Google Maps? Okay. When you do that and you put in a location, you're given 2 choices. One is a paid route, the turnpike, and the other is a non-paid route, I-95. One's faster. The paid route is faster by 5 to 7 minutes maybe. The unpaid route takes 5 to 7 minutes longer. That's all we're doing here. Okay? By me having a conversation, once we get to the compensation part, which we will get to, it's just a little detour for 5 to 7 minutes where I'm going to discuss with you the pros and cons of offering compensation. Okay? Not get defensive. You know what I saw at the beginning of this when all these rule changes are starting to happen? All these agents posting shit trying to defend why they make so much money. That, my friends, is dumb. Can you imagine your doctor going on, well, you know, the reason why I make so much money is because blah, 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 blah. What would you think of that? You'd be like, I don't care. Right. By the way, you make too much. Right? But that's what we were doing as an industry. And that's silly. So I shouldn't be getting defensive, trying to defend. How many people felt the need to defend truthfully? When people, if anybody asks you about commissions, you feel like, how dare you ask me? What? Don't you know who I am? Don't you know what I do? Don't you know only my mom watches my Instagram? I find it amazing our industry puts people on panels who have like 2,000 followers and they talk to you about media. That's comical. They don't make any money from it. It's dumb. And again, this is the part that is exactly the same. The first part is from the time I hit the door to the time I start to talk about price. And all this is orchestrated, by the way. The next segment is the portion where we talk about price. The last segment is handling objections and closing. This has not, guys, has this changed? No. Hasn't changed at all. Now, what's super interesting about this is all orchestrated. Now, my daughter, she does like Broadway, you know? She's had the good fortune of being selected to be the lead in like a bunch of different plays. And she was just Willy Wonka, right? And it's interesting. They give these 11-year-olds, my daughter's 11, they gave her 3 weeks to memorize 48 lines and put on this whole show. You know what they do for the first 3 days of practice? They just practice where they stand on the stage for 3 days before they even get to words. Then they role play through the words 3 times a day for 3 weeks. And then right before the presentation, it's 8-hour days. Can you imagine if you prepared for a listing presentation like that? Instead, do you know what you do? You go in there, you're like, ha, 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 oh my God, your kids go to school here, my kids go to school here, yay. That's why you don't list properties, guys, in high volume. The only people who list with you are people who know you like you, love you. You feel the energy in the room? It's like, fuck. Scripted system, guys, I would go on 150 appointments a year. I did it the same way every single time. Let me ask you a question. Do you want your pilot winging it? Do you want your surgeon winging it? Do you want your surgeon to be like, you know what, Esteban, I know you really well. I don't need to look at the checklist. Fuck it, I'm just gonna wing it today. How quickly would you get off the table? You'd be like, excuse me, take off all your shit, like I'm out. So the same way every single time, it follows this framework. So what does that sound like? We hit the door. As soon as we hit the door, guys, I had to remind myself at the beginning to smile. I would show up like this. I'm here to list your home. All fucking business, right? Aaron Novello, nice to meet you. Yeah, what I'd like to do is just to take a quick look around the home. Would that be okay? Did you want me to take my shoes off first? Why? It's your space. I want to be respectful of it. Okay. How many people, somebody said to you, no, don't worry about it, but you know the shoes lined up? Take your fucking shoes off. Okay? because it's their space. I just want to be respectful of their space. And then while I'm starting to look through the home, right? Awesome. Well, I'm noticing here, David, that the home is really tastefully furnished. So when we have offers come in, are we going to be including contents, or do you want to take that with you to your next destination? When who has offers come in? How interesting. I'm assumptively closing, like we are already doing this. Have we talked about price? Have we talked about commission? Have we talked about your bullshit buyers from Venezuela? Now we continue to walk through. And if I remember correctly, Amy, based on our conversation you mentioned in preparation for connecting, you don't plan on making any modifications or changes before I start to bring buyers through. Is that correct? Before who starts to bring buyers through? You see? We are moving in the direction of what we're doing. I'm assumptively closing. How many times do you have to ask somebody to do something before they typically say yes? 7 to 8. You know what most of you guys do? You try to get them to like you first, and then when you get to the end, you ask them once. And then you go back and you're like, oh my God, I think I really got this one. Oh my God, we had cafecitos together. They're going to list with me. And then they call you and you're like, hey, we really appreciate your time. We listed with somebody else. You know why? Because they followed a process. So they say, no, we're not planning on making any changes or modifications. Okay, great. Great. So I guess we could sit down here. We could sit down in the kitchen. I want to direct that conversation. Do you know why? Otherwise, I'll end up on the couch like this with a little doggy on my lap. And you're like, what the hell's happening here? How did I get here? Anybody besides me ever had that happen? Yeah. Do you know why that happened? Yeah, she's like, shit, that happens to me all the time. Do you know why that happened? Because you're letting them direct it. You're being too nice. Somebody needs to lead, guys. You know who should lead? The one who knows what they're doing. So once we get to that place, first and foremost, I just want to begin our time together just by saying thank you. And mean it. Smile. I always like to begin these conversations just by asking a few quick questions. Would that be okay? Yes. First of all, does it demonstrate that I know what I'm doing?
Yes.
Am I following a process?
Yes.
Does that make you feel safe?
Yes.
100%. You ever been around somebody who's disorganized? How do you feel? Yes. Yeah. Well, agents are like, oh my God, I got like my hippo I have to go fucking feed. And you're like, what? That's why I was like 30 minutes late. Like, I can't believe it. Just a shit show. You're not giving people certainty. That's why they're not hiring you. You understand? So I just have a couple quick questions to ask just to make sure that I'm fully prepared and do a great job. Would that be all right? Yep. So the first question I have, which I'm pretty sure I know the answer to in preparation for connecting, is that you've already decided that you would like to sell the property. Is that correct? You're not interested in doing something else with it, like holding on to it, renting it out, or something like that. I should know this because I asked it in pre-qual. If you don't know this before you're going on the appointment, you're doing it wrong. If you're finding that shit out while you're sitting in front of them, you're doing it wrong and wasting tremendous amounts of time. So that leads me to my second question, which I'm also pretty sure I know the answer to, is you guys want to position the property price-wise to sell. You're not interested in having it sit on the market for like 6 or 7 months just testing the market. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right? And they're like, yeah, that's right. Okay, good. Make that check. I should know this, by the way. Because in pre-qual, I need to be asking, is it an option for you to not sell the home? Is it an option for you to rent the home and still move? I've only spoken to you. You seem to be excited about selling. How does your significant other feel about it? I need to know this shit before I go see them. If you don't know these, then you're going to be spending lots of times on appointments that actually aren't fruitful. And then that leads me to my third question, which I'm also pretty sure I know the answer to. I'm aware I sent you over some information in preparation for connecting. I'm sure you did some due diligence. You checked me out online. You saw track record and reviews. So Natalie, have you already decided, notice what I'm doing, because we're asking for something. Have you already decided that you would like for me and my team to help you with the sale? You're like, wow, oh my God, you asked them so soon? Yeah, you know why? I want to get out of the way. Because by the way, how many times have I closed already? 3 or 4. Have we talked about commission? Have we talked about price? Have you talked about your imaginary buyers in Venezuela? Nope. Do you see? Now, what are they going to say potentially to that question? What are the options?
Yes. No.
We're interviewing someone else.
Good. So look, there's only 3. Yes, which inside you do the happy dance. No, or maybe. If they say anything other than yes, yeah, I get it. This is a big decision. You want to make sure you're making the best decision possible. I want to be clear that that is my intention. So provided that what I say makes sense and you feel comfortable and confident with me that I can help, I brought all of the appropriate paperwork with me and I'm prepared to go to work for you today. Fair enough? What am I doing? Yeah. And what are they trying to do? Ho, ho, ho. And I'm like, no, no, no. You're not getting off the hook that easy, team. We're not here to talk about tea and crumpets. We're here to do business. What I'm also doing is taking back status because they want to make the status lower. You see? That's what I'm here for. And by the way, that's 4 or 5 closes already. Now I'm going to continue. Along those lines, you were kind enough to share with me that the main reason that you wanted to sell this property was this, this, and this. And you were looking for an agent that had a great track record, great reviews, that could connect you with, some vendors. Is there anything else you'd be looking for from me today that will cause you to feel comfortable and confident just to go ahead and hire me and put me to work? That's another. How interesting. And what are they going to say there? I want to talk to you about. That dirty little word that nobody wants to talk about. But I want them to talk about it, because if we don't talk about it, guess what's going to happen? They're not going to hire me. And then they're going to be like, oh, I talked to this other agent. He said this about the commission. You're like, bro, I would have done that. Like, you didn't know because you didn't ask. Anyway, I want to talk to you about the commission. Great. And what I'm aware of is that certainly is not going to be a reason why we don't do business, David. I'm sure we'll come up with something that's mutually beneficial to all parties. I want you to feel comfortable with the decision that you end up making. But I could promise you this, again, I know we'll be able to work that out. So provided that that's the case, it seems like we'll be able to proceed and move forward. Is that correct? And they're like, yeah. Okay, great. So the good news is we really only have to focus on a couple things today during our time together. The first is your motivation to sell, which is clear. You've already decided you're going to do that. The second issue is the price. Notice, am I talking about marketing? Why not? It's bullshit. That's why. Your pictures are my pictures. Your Matterport video is my Matterport video. Your ads you run on Facebook is my ads I run on Facebook, right? That's why we're not talking about it. So I prepared for you this competitive market analysis, so it's called a CMA, the purpose of which is really an attempt to make a very educated guess with regards to value, and it's comprised of two types of research. The first type is what is active on the market right now and not selling, which is great because your neighbors have done us a huge favor. Jesus, do you know what it is?
Tested the market.
At prices that aren't working. That's very helpful to us. We can learn from that data. The second piece of data we'll look at is what has actually sold and closed most recently. Because what something's worth is what somebody's willing to. How interesting. Now, when you do it like this, do you know what the seller's going to say? Exactly what you guys just did. Now, I'm curious. If I get you to tell me, is that more powerful than if I tell you? Why? Because you never argue with your own information. You will argue with mine. So we'll look at this information together as a team, and what we'll see come to the surface, guys, is not a pinpoint to the penny in terms of price, but instead a tight, realistic range as to what's going to be reasonable. And then from there, it'll come down to strategy, because how we position the property price-wise is a strategy and attempt to get the most. And we'll go over those strategies because I want you to feel comfortable with the one we end up choosing. And whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? How do most of you guys present price? I believe I can get, correct? You take ownership of it, and then when you go to ask for a price reduction, what do they say?
You told
me. Yeah, you know who did that? You did. You're trying to go in and lead with authority. Don't you know who I am? I got a 75 on a test. I have $1,000 and I'm not a felon yet. That was the criteria for me to become an agent. Most of the agents I know should not be giving any economic advice to anybody. You're there to help facilitate. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. Good. So before we get into the analysis, I just wanted to review some of the questions I asked you over the phone just to ensure I could do a great job for you. Is that okay? Yeah. So you shared with me that the main reason that you're selling the property is you're looking to go to X. Is that correct? By the way, does this demonstrate that I'm listening to you? Waiters that write down your order get 27% higher tips than those who don't. It gives proof that somebody is what? Listening. You also shared with me that time frame wise, you want to make this move happen in the next 120 days. Is that correct? And they're like, yeah. So, and then here's where here's performative. So you're like, wow. So let me think about that. Like 30, 60. What that would mean, David, is we would have to be under contract in the next 60 days because it usually takes 45 to 60 days to close. Have you thought about that? And they're like, wow, sort of. It's like, okay. So that's something to consider when we're thinking about price and strategy and how we position the property. And then in terms of showings, like, are you guys typically home or who should be our point of contact? Notice in terms of showings, what am I assuming? That you're listening with me. Great. So we'll review this analysis. We'll see that realistic range emerge, and then we'll discuss strategy. And then if it all makes sense, we can take care of the appropriate paperwork. Fair enough? Great. What have I accomplished in this section? How many times have I closed?
1,000,000.
7 to 8. I've demonstrated that I've listened to you in the pre-qual. I brought up any objections, which is the commission. Do you see? I've gathered all the information I need in order to give a really good presentation. So now we get to the pricing portion of listing presentation. Now, why do you think this is a challenge for most agents? You're afraid to tell the truth. Let me ask you a question. Can you really serve them if you don't tell them the truth?
No.
Do you want a doctor who's afraid to tell you the truth?
No.
She laughed. She's like, no, that would be what? Malpractice. Now, the key component there is telling. See, because if I get you to self-discover where we need to be at, I'm not telling you. So therefore, can I be held responsible for it when I call you and you need an adjustment? No. So here's what that language sounds like. The competitive market analysis, as I mentioned, it's an attempt to determine value in the eyes of the buyer. Are you familiar, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, with the way buyers determine value? And then shut up. What are they going to say?
No.
No or? Yes. Whatever they say, you say the same thing. Great. Then you know that what they do is they're going to comparison shop. They're going to look at what's active on the market, not selling. They're going to look at what's sold and closed most recently. And from all of that information, they're going to make a determination as to where they feel comfortable making you an offer. Does that make sense to you? So as we review this information, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, it's really, really helpful to really put on our buyer's hat, because I'm aware that the buyer's hat is different than the seller's hat. Now, every time you say that, do you know what they're going to do? They're going to nod their head because they know that. Because when you're a buyer, what are you thinking? Everything's two? And when you're a seller, what are you thinking? My house is the shit. I have mallards in the backyard. I redid my toilet yesterday. I put doorknobs on my house. That's got to be worth $100,000. I literally had a guy one time tell me, I feed the mallards in my backyard. I'm like, an appraiser doesn't give a shit about the mallards, just so you know. It's a little bit of a challenge. At the same time, it's super helpful. As we look at this information, to really do our best to look at it through the eyes of the buyer, because I'm aware that the buyer's hat is different than the seller's hat. And the question to be asking yourself, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is based on what's active on the market and not selling, which we'll review, based on what has sold and closed most recently. The question to be thinking about is, if you were going to buy this home all over again in its current condition, where would you feel comfortable making an offer that you believe would be reflective of fair market value? So then as we review the information, now it's like, okay, so first we're going to look at what's active on the market. So here's this property. It's 1265 Banana Street. It's in your neighborhood. Have you seen it? Why am I asking her that? Yeah, she's already been in the house or whatever, but also if she hasn't, I want her to tell me. No, I haven't seen it. It's like, okay, well, what I did is I brought with me on my iPad. How many of you guys are presenting with sheets of paper? Don't lie. Exactly. Look, she looked at him like, motherfucker, I know you are using a piece of paper. I watch you go on appointments. I swear, bro, she went like this. She was like, if you are using sheets of paper, you're operating like it's 50 years ago. That is not the world that we live in anymore. Imagine you go in with sheets of paper and I go in with an iPad. Who looks more professional? Are you bringing an abacus to do the net sheet? What we're going to do is, like, here's this property, right? And we can see here it's a 3-bedroom, correct? How many baths does it have? I want her to tell me, because if I tell her, she's going to argue with me. What's the square footage? And they'll be like, it's 1,500 square feet. Okay, so for all intents and purposes, in terms of a footprint, it's very similar to yours. Would you agree? Yes. Excellent. Well, let's take a look at the picture. See, if you're presenting with paper, you can't do this. Because, okay, how many of you guys have touched a physical picture and went like this to it? You know why? You've been trained that way. Technology has trained you. And if I'm presenting with pieces of paper, do you know what happens? You can't do what? This. I have a coaching client, Jose, and he fought me on this, like presenting, even though I'm older than him. He was like, nah, I'm not going to use an iPad. I want to stick to paper. I'm like, okay, grandpa. And then he finally went on an appointment, and here's what got him. You know what got him? He sat down with a lady. She's like, no, my kitchen's nicer than everybody's, blah, blah, blah. He's like, okay, let's take a look. He zoomed in. She's like, wait, let me get my glasses. Put her glasses on. She's like, oh, that kitchen's nicer than mine. He never presented with paper again. And I'm like, yeah, would you say that kitchen is like similar to yours, or perhaps it has some features and amenities, like some upgrades that, yours doesn't? And then be quiet. Now she has to answer. Yeah, it's a little bit nicer, I guess. Meanwhile, it's like fucking much nicer. So it's a little bit. I'm like, bro, you got like 1970 kitchen in there. Like, what are you talking about? It's like green. They have some features and amenities that we don't. How much are they asking? And she tells me, well, they're asking $550. Yeah. Do you know what DOM stands for?
Days of market.
Yep. Yo, she gets the star for good student. She's like, days on market. I'm not giving out stars today, just so you know. Then I'm like, yeah, how much, what does DOM stands for? And they're like, days on market. I'm like, great. And then what they're going to realize is, man, that's been on the market for like 60 days and it hasn't sold. Here's the important question. What do you think the marketplace is telling them about their price and product? What do we want to do? Verbally vomit. It's clearly too high because according to my calculations and my 75 on a test and the economics and shit that I don't know about, it's too high. That's dumb. But if you tell me that it's too high, what happens? Then it's true. It feels, and it's true. If you tell me. If I tell you, you're going to argue with me. It's like, yeah. And here's where it's important. You ready for the language? I agree with you. The marketplace is telling us that's a little bit too high. Who's telling us?
The marketplace.
Who do we want to make tell us? Don't you know who I am? Ha ha. I'm the neighborhood expert. Ha ha. Guys, it's stupid. So then we go again, and we do this again with 2 other comps, 2 more actives. Then when we get to the closed. So here's the ones that have actually sold and closed, okay? So let's look at this one. How many bedrooms does it have? 3. How many baths? 2. How much square footage? So for all intents and purposes, very similar, correct? Let's take a look again. And you know what, by this time, you know what she's gonna do? She's gonna take the iPad from me and be like, can I look? Sure. She's gonna go, shoo, shoo. So would you say that the features and amenities of that home, are they similar to yours? Or perhaps maybe they're got a little bit more benefits than yours does? And then she's gonna have to tell me, yeah, like their kitchen's nicer. So let's look here. Do you see right there? It tells us what it sold for. How much did it sell for? She's like 510. Was something wrong with it? You know, I thought something similar. At the same time, it was just a normal transaction. I'm curious, is it beginning to make sense as to why the ones at 550 have been on the market for 60 days and hasn't sold? Uh-huh. You see? I'm painting a picture. I'm helping you to self-discover instead of using my ego to try to ram it in your face. Having reviewed this information together as a team, seen what's active on the market, not selling, seen what's sold and closed most recently, realistically, if you were a buyer, not a seller, because I know those hats are different, and you were going to buy this place all over again, where do you think you would feel comfortable making an offer that you believe would be reflective of fair market value? And then do my favorite thing, shut up. Because let me ask you a question. When is the decision-making happening? When you're speaking or when there's silence? Silence. But we are insecure, so we want to fill the air with words that don't mean anything. You see, I have to be comfortable enough just to be quiet. Because you know what's going to happen? If it's a pair, wife's going to look at the husband, like silent communication happening. And they'll be like, well, you know, like I see what you're saying. The marketplace is showing me like 510, but can't we start a little bit higher? That's something they say all the time, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, when most people respond to that as defensive, that's dumb. Don't do that. Instead, you ready? Sure, we can. I want to be clear. You're the boss here. My job is to help you to make an informed decision. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So what I'd like to do is to go over with you the options that we have so you can make the decision that you feel is best price-wise. And then whatever you decide, I'll support you 100%. Fair enough? Notice who's in control.
They are.
Have I made them wrong?
No.
Do we make people wrong with our facial expressions, tonality when somebody says something that's ridiculous?
Yes.
Don't let your body like betray you, Eden. My job is to help you. It's never to talk you into doing anything. So let's go over the options that you have. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. So the first option is that we start higher. The logic behind that is I can always come. I can't go back. Notice, this is exactly how I present it because they fill in the blanks. Do you know why? Because they're thinking it. Make sense? Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that strategy per se. There are a few considerations though. The first consideration is that it takes longer. Okay? Now you were kind enough to share with me that in terms of this move to Texas, you had to be there in the next 120 days. So that means we need to be under contract in the next 60. Tell me this, what would happen on the outside chance if we were still sitting here 120 days from now and the home was not sold? What would that mean for you and your family?
Good.
Husband looks at the wife, she's like, that would be terrible. And you're like, okay. So is it an option for you maybe to make the move and like leave the family here? No, it's not an option. Okay, so that's something to consider with regards to that strategy. The second issue is this issue of perceived value. So one of the first questions that buyers ask me when they come inside of a property is how many days this has been on the market? Why do you think they ask me that? Now notice, am I telling you why they're asking me that? No. Why do you think they ask me that? And they're like, well, you know, I guess they want to see if something's wrong with it. Exactly. So as time goes by, do you think perceived value stays the same or do you think it goes down? Interesting. So with your goal and objective being to net the most and do it quickly and efficiently, does it seem like the strategy of starting high and coming down serves you best? Probably not. Okay, so that's something to consider. Now, the second strategy is where we position it very competitively. By that, what I mean is very close to what's sold and closed most recently or a hair below. The logic behind that strategy is even though interest rates have doubled, there's still demand in this price point, and we're still seeing multiple offer situations. Now, I'm wondering, in a multiple offer situation, who usually wins? The person selling or the person buying? And why is that?
They have options.
Interesting. So the question is do you want to put yourself in a position where you can have multiple offers to choose from with the best terms and the best price, with the possibility of them bidding up the price? Is that a position you want to be in?
Yes. Yeah.
Interesting. So with that being said, and with those two options that are at your disposal, whenever you decide I'll support you, which one do you think would serve you and your family best with this move to Texas? And then, yes. See, we'll get you guys to learn this. I love this. You'll be on an appointment, you'll hear me in your head. Shut up. So I got a question for you guys. What is the best tool or vehicle to generate leads? How many people think it's proactive and aggressive outbound prospecting? Picking up the phone, knocking on doors. How many people? Show of hands.